I don't know whether, I'm on? That's good. Steve, good to see you, brother.
Thank you, brother.
How you feeling?
100%.
100%. Very good, very good. Good to see everyone here today. There. And who's this young lady sitting here? See, glad they, aren't we all? Aren't we all? Hey, I'm taking this off. One more week, and it'll be 2 weeks after that second shot. And I think that's good. That's good. But good to see everyone, and good to teach. Haven't taught for a while, and I always like to teach because when you teach, you learn more yourself with it, and so that keeps you. Mary Lynn on Sunday morning, she's got all these websites that she goes to for church music and so forth, and we listen to all the a cappella singing from all over. One church up in Missouri has a great one. But I was listening to one of the songs this morning. It says, "Dig a little deeper in God's storehouse of love." And I don't think I remembered that song, but I thought pretty good. And so, when we come to church, we're digging a little deeper for God's love, and we hope that's good. Good. Hope everyone is feeling well, and let's remember those that we need to continue to remember in our prayer. Activities, of course, the third Sunday luncheon's there, and if you forgot to bring a sandwich, I'm sure someone's got one for you over there for that, and as we look forward to those times. Let's remember, too, a beautiful day, and pretty soon we're going to spring forward, and when we spring forward, we're going to spring back at 5 o'clock, as we mentioned the other time. So let's keep that in mind for our Sunday evening worship. So looking forward. We're studying the book of Joshua, as you can see on the screen, and we'll be looking through that. It's a great study, and look forward to it. Who do we need to remember? Anyone we need to remember in our prayers? Special? Because we want to pray for everybody physically and spiritually to keep them from that. And we have a number of Bible classes going on this morning too, and so we're grateful for that and for the teachers there. Join me in prayer, please. Father, we thank you for the beauty of the day, and as we have this opportunity to come together this morning to learn more of your will for us, and as we look forward to our worship today, to remember the greatest gift of your Son and his death, burial, and resurrection, and we're so grateful. And Father, I just want to ask a special blessing upon this good church family, and we ask you to continue to keep us safe, keep us strong as we continue to reach out and to grow in your name. Be with us this morning. Open our hearts and mind and help us to do the things you would have us to do. In your Son's name, amen. Okay, let's look at the book of Joshua, and we ask you to look, and particularly at Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy helps prepare us a good bit. In fact, Numbers. Deuteronomy and Numbers gives us a lot of information preparing us for Joshua. But Joshua is an important part here in our lives or in our study of the Bible, and the conquest of Canaan there. And what is Canaan? The promised land. This is the promised land that was spoken of very early from Abraham on, given that. And now finally beginning to get back and get to the conquest of the promised land. Kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but just hoping that one thing that we can get right. This is a verse looking ahead to Joshua chapter 24, verses 14 and 15. I've really kind of highlighted. Sometimes you'll see this verse repeated, and they leave some of the Old Testament type things out. But I think it's so good to us as a family and for our families. And it said that, "Now therefore fear the Lord, serve Him in sincerity and in truth. And that's, one of the things from the church, we want to make sure that we are doing the truth. And if I fail, to do that, hope you please remind me. Now, fear the Lord, serve Him in sincerity and truth. Put away the gods which your father served on the other side of the river and in Egypt. Of course, he's talking to the Canaanites in this case. But here, you and I fear the Lord. We serve the Lord. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourself this day whom you will serve. We have a great problem in our society today about people deciding that, who they're going to serve, or are they going to serve anyone. And then the Old Testament part, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And that's a great thing. And I know a lot of you look around, I see my son sitting over here, my daughter-in-law, my wife, as a family, and we serve the Lord there. And we want to make sure that that's one of our goals there. And it's very tough because I got sisters that are not part of the church anymore, and those kinds of things hurt with that. But, and they have a tremendous background that dates back to one of the early churches in Bridgeport, Alabama, the oldest Church of Christ in Alabama, called Rock Springs Church, dates before Restoration. Now, that's a great story I've told before. It won't get you to heaven, but I love to tell the story with it there. And it sure had an influence on me. And I still love to go by Rock Springs Church there. Rock Springs is right up on the, as I said, Bridgeport. Bridgeport's on the Tennessee River there. And it's right up close, where you just go a little bit north and you're in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee. But is that
where your family went?
That's what on my mother's side. She was a Johnson, and that family Johnsons were in there. And so that's, my mother didn't know, but that's where my grandmother did there. I'm old. But
we won't hold it against you.
And I want to get older. I got a workout that Mary Lynn found says growing young. I'm not sure if I'm growing young. At least I hope I'm staying even on it. Okay, but anyway, that's what with all those side notes there. But again, I hope one thing that we get out. But for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, and I hope that we look at it from that aspect. And again, we see that today's pretty much just going to kind of be an introduction and a background. I would encourage you to read on. We'll talk about some divisions of the Joshua and things of that particular nature there. And here Joshua begins the section of the Old Testament journey called the Prophets, because each was written by one or more of the prophets other than Moses. In other words, Moses right up to Deuteronomy, and then Joshua is, as we'll look and talk about too, is given credit for writing most of Joshua there. And again, as we see there, that the main thing that we're looking at, that Joshua is the conquest and the settling of Canaan, the promised land. And we'll look at those promises from that standpoint. Again, talks about Joshua being the author of the book. And he kind of states that as we look on back further there in Joshua 24. And this is much like Deuteronomy's record of Moses' death. It's very similar in Joshua. And it's amazing at the similarities between Moses and Joshua there. And put my glasses on. Just hitting some highlights there. that Moses, the meaning of his name is to draw forth. And Joshua is the Yahweh saves. And also we'll talk about that. What does Joshua also, what's another name for Joshua too sometimes? You can speak up. Jesus, right, as we talk about that too. And of course, Moses' greatest achievement, he was Israel's deliverer and the lawgiver, and certainly the first great prophet there. And then, of course, Joshua, the leader during the conquest, those comparisons there. Moses' family, son of Abram and Jochebed of the tribe of Levi. Joshua was the son of Nun in the tribe of Ephraim. All of these are things that we've read ahead of time and earlier there. Of course, we know where Moses was. Where was Moses raised as a young fellow? Pharaoh's court. He was in Pharaoh's house there. Had to be a nice place to live before you moved out into the wilderness there. And as we know about that. And of course, Joshua was raised into slavery. He was out in that slavery. He wasn't in Pharaoh's court there. And of course, then Joshua became that military leader for Moses there, and he became a very good leader. And that's one of the things I like about Joshua. Talks about a great deal of leadership. But who does Joshua give the credit to? Who? Well, going back to Moses, but all through here, who's it talks about who really the commander is? God. So over and over in Joshua, we'll talk about that God is the commander here. And now here's some similarities. This is one of the things I wanted to get to. Moses took his sandals off in the presence of God, if we remember reading back in Exodus. Joshua will read about taking his sandals off in the presence of the commander. And that, in this case, we're talking about God in this case. Moses was initially reluctant to lead. You remember the story about that. And same way with Joshua. He needed encouragement to lead. We all need encouragement for things. So Joshua, the same way there. Moses became the Israel's leader at around age 80. Joshua was about 80 when he took over. And so again, we see the how close together there. Moses, of course, we know the story about the Red Sea. And we're going to be studying about Joshua leading the people over the Jordan River. Now, I remember when I first read that, I didn't think too much about that. You know, the Jordan, that's not such a big river. But at the time of Joshua, and we'll study about that, the Jordan River was a big river. It was a big river. I'll get ahead of myself a little bit, but one of the things when we will study that, and I remember going back and getting some information, and having visited to the Jordan, there are dams way up north now, where that river is not as big as it used to be. But it was a big river at that time, and of course we'll read about when Joshua goes across that river. So again, the similarities.
It probably was running pretty swift,
probably
too,
so.
at the time.
Yeah, probably so. Well, not probably so, probably for sure there on it. All right, so across the Jordan River, Moses interceded for the Israelites before God so many times there. And again, same way with Joshua. He interceded for the Israelites before God in Joshua. We'll study about that. Moses exhorted Israel to obey God's law. And in Deuteronomy 30, again, I encourage you to look at Deuteronomy there. And again, all through Joshua, we're going to be reading about how Joshua did. Statement? False alarm. Okay. Again, talked about exhorting the law there. Moses delivered a challenging farewell address in Deuteronomy, if you want to read that. Then in Joshua 23, he delivered a challenging farewell address there. In fact, one of them is those verses that we just read a while ago, that for me and my family there. And Moses was called the servant of the Lord. Joshua was called the servant of the Lord. What can you and I be called? We can be a servant. We are servants of the Lord there, as Christians there. And hopefully this will help us there from that standpoint. Length of life, Moses 120, Joshua 110. So the similarities between the two were just outstanding, and as you follow there and as you read for that. You guys never have any trouble with this, do you, Bobby? Houston. Where do you point?
Point back to the window.
There you go. All right, you can't read, well, you can read it better too. Mine is even smaller there. Again, we talked about Joshua, we mentioned a while ago, and in the Greek, his name would be Jesus, as we looked at that. We've talked about things, how he reflected his mentor, Moses. You can read in Numbers his loyalty, and nothing more important than being loyal there. Courageous, and we'll see a lot about that. He was an emotional person. Is being emotional bad? No. That's having good feelings for one another. It's certainly important there. And he was intelligent, a wise military man. No substitute for being intelligent and wise. He could be beguiled, and we all have to do that. That's what advertising is about, isn't it? Trying to beguile you on things. But a strong and religious leader, and that's so important there. Obedient, devoted, a good example. He focused, he spied out the Canaan. And that's a great story there we'll be talking about when Joshua and Caleb. I mentioned Joshua and Caleb because why? When they went to spy out. Come on, that's right. The other ones, what the other ones say?
No, we cannot. They're
Okay.
giants.
They went back, they were scared, said we can't do that. But Caleb and Joshua, and we'll talk more about that, and so they were there. Had endurance, speaking ability, obviously from being a good leader there, and they kept the oath. All of these things that we'll be looking at there. We'll look at Joshua here in a minute on some of these verses, these times that they were slaves in Israel there, about in Egypt, then their exodus from Egypt, and them taking over Canaan there, and all those periods of time as we look through there. So important there from looking at it.
I got a question, Frank.
Yes, sir.
Where did the name Canaan come from? Wasn't he a son of somebody earlier on? And that's where he settled before they left?
Yeah, Canaan, help me, Bobby or Houston, anybody.
Canaan, I think you have to go back to Genesis chapter 10 to get the
I think even when they first started coming down
Correct.
From
Pagan
into that
people.
area. And then, of course, they became known as the Canaanites, so forth, too. But good question, Art. Good question. Teacher should have known the answer to that when we talk about Canaan, shouldn't he?
And Hivites and Jebusites.
Well, we're going to talk about those folks for sure. Uh, Canaan was the son of Ham.
That's what it says. Genesis 10:6.
All right, that's when they were first coming in. That's when they
Ham.
first started coming down. That's from the very beginning there. Thank you. Kazi?
I looked it up. It says it's a Hebrew Greek word meaning cane or measuring rod, passed into Christian usage to mean norm or rule of faith.
A yardstick, is that would be correct? Okay. Again, we talked about Joshua being the writer here, and again, Joshua is Jehovah. The same word in the New Testament as Jesus, as someone mentioned a while ago. A great general, born a slave, 40 years old at the time of Exodus, 80 years old when he received his commission, 110 at his death when we talked about that. Again, he a man of prayer, courage, leadership, enthusiasm, fidelity, a type of Christ and name of work. And we're going to see a lot about that. Joshua, of course, there are a lot of battles, a lot of things, problems and things that he had with that. And again, he shows that a man of average ability may become a leader in the church. Received his call not in flaming letters across, but from an old man. Who's the old man he received that from? Who? Moses. If you look back at Deuteronomy and in Numbers and so forth, Moses gave him the challenge there. He knew God, knew Joshua, and saw that he was fitted by God to be a leader, and that was what Moses there. So basically, the book falls into two main divisions. The first 12 chapters talks about the conquest of the land. And we'll look at that just in a minute too. And so the good bit of it there is a lot about battles. Well, there's almost battles all the way through. But the first 12 chapters talks about the conquest of the land. Then the next part is the division of the land. And just quickly, how is the land divided? How did you divide the land up? Or who is it divided to? The tribes. The tribes of Jacob there and so forth as they do that. So we'll look at those and some very important things about from that standpoint. And then the last two chapters just gives warnings and admonitions to it as we look through. But first we'll be talking about the conquest of the land as you study chapters 1 through 12, and as we look at from that standpoint. And one of the things, they call it a Deuteronomic principle, but we'll learn throughout Joshua, talks about obeying and be blessed, or disobey and be punished. And we're going to see that a lot in the battles in Joshua. If they obeyed and did the right things, they won the battle. If they didn't do the right things, and I'm not talking about just from a fighting standpoint, if they hadn't done the things that God had told them through Joshua, then they lost the battle. And we'll see a lot of that, that particular situation. So we learn to obey, and how important that is there. So it's very important there in those victories and so forth that they had there. Before that, the time was pretty right. And again, as you look at the history here, for the Israelites to come back to Canaan, because the strong powers had the Hittites, which Bobby mentioned a while ago, had been kind of lost their power, and and so a lot of the strong powers at that particular time were gone, and that's the reason why they could move back in as they did. And again, we'll see a lot of interesting things. So Egypt or Babylon at that time was not very strong, And so they had that ability to come on in. And so it was very easy. But we're going to see a lot of things, and when you'll see them talking about these major powers had moved out, but the people were still there that they had to defeat, and they had established what you call city-states. And city-states were established right on up into history. When you read about it in England and France and so forth there, the people had city-states. But you'll read a lot about kings, because you might have a city-state and there was a king of that particular city-state. So we'll read about, sometimes you're reading about a king, he's just a king over that particular city-state. So God gave them all of that, gave them the land, gave them the towns that had already been established, and we'll see how they go about fighting for that. So it was important there that we look at that. So again, the conquest of Canaan is what we're looking about and what we hope to find out there. Joshua really, one of the things that we find about why he's so important as he took over from Moses is really one of the last strong figures. Our next book in the Old Testament is Judges. Well, Judges didn't prove to be very strong for very long, and then we know God started making a monarchies out of it. He started the king situation there with Saul, David, and on from that standpoint. But Joshua was the last strong central authority figure there. And so bringing the people into Israel fulfilled a promise. And that's why it's so important as we study the Bible, as we find out how we fill those promises from that standpoint, and the importance for that. So important things as we look for the history and as we look back to those particular times there. Purpose completes the redemption out of Egypt. Salvation is not only a redemption from hell, but a redemption to heaven, and we all want to go there. Jesus was delivered for our offenses, raised again for our justification. And so this transition up to this point, Jehovah had spoken by dreams, visions, by angelic ministry. Now a new method is introduced. The law of Moses is written voice of Jehovah, Jehovah 1:8. As you read there, it's just important. Jehovah says over and over how important the law is. And he had to repeat it to the people so many times throughout Joshua, that the law, that God's law there, Moses' law, is the important thing. Not a miracle type thing from that standpoint. God had established up, and they were ready to go from that standpoint. All right, Joshua 1:3, every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that I have given to you, as I said unto Moses. So that's pretty important there, that everywhere you walk, then that's yours. That God has given it to you there. And I thought I had my Bible verses on this. How about looking up, somebody, if you would, look up Jeremiah 23:8, and someone look up Ezekiel 37:21. Jeremiah 23:8. If you find that, read it, please. 23:8.
But the Lord liveth, which brought up and which led the seed of the house of Israel out of the north country and from all the countries whither I have driven them, and they shall dwell in their own land.
Okay, so again, how important there then that they're going to be able to stay in their own land there. How about Ezekiel 37:21? Causey?
Then say to them, Thus saith the Lord God, Surely I will take the children of Israel from among the nations, wherever they have gone, and will gather them from every side and bring them into their own land.
Okay. So again, coming to their own land there. Okay, this is a map that we'll keep coming back to on several, well, all the way through. Maybe we'll probably look at it every week there as we look. This is Canaan, the promised land that we see, and we'll talk about them. Here's where they crossed the Jordan River. We'll talk about later. Here's where they came up out of the wilderness, and they were in this area too a pretty good while, and trying to decide. We'll read history there about what happens or doesn't happen from that standpoint. Then, very important part here when they cross in to Jordan. And then as we begin to look at the areas there. Talks about the boundaries there. And here you see the Bible talks about the Great Sea. But what is the Great Sea on this side when they talk about the boundaries? What is it now? What the Mediterranean Sea? And of course we can see. And then of course the Jordan River boundaries. And so he talks about then the north boundaries and then the south down from the desert areas and so forth down here around Edom all the way up north to Lebanon. Your Bible may talk about Lebanon as we read there, as we talk about the boundaries. We'll also talk about the given a property on the east side of the River Jordan. And maybe probably jumping ahead a little bit, but who was the property on the east side? Huh? Manasseh, half Manasseh, we're going to read, you'll read half of Manasseh, and we have another map on that too. Half of Manasseh would be here, but the other half they chose to be on that side. And how about the other two?
Was Dan one of them?
Huh?
Was Dan?
No, Dan's one of them, but not on that side. Bobby?
Gad, I think is one.
Gad,
And Reuben should have been the other.
There you go. Gad and Reuben. Again, two of the tribes, but and as we read, and we'll go back, and they talked about, how good the land was and so forth. And God kind of got upset about it for a while. But then later on it changed, and then when they did do that, then they were on this side of it. Who was Manasseh? Very important too. Son of Joseph. Son of Joseph. And so we don't want to forget Joseph there. So Manasseh, son of Joseph, and part of that tribe. Again, it's great stories as we read, decided to stay on this side of the River Jordan. So then we'll look at all the tribes there.
Did you say you visited there?
Yeah, we've been to back in the early 90s.
Whereabouts?
We went pretty much all over. If I had a newer, we covered Jerusalem pretty good. We had a minister at Dalton that semi-retired, and he had been a missionary to Israel, and so knew a lot about Israel from that. Helped establish a school in Israel, and so it was a great guide. And then we had a local guide that was very good, and so we really covered from one end of, well, I guess it's probably probably far south we went. We did go down to the Dead Sea. What's the name of the mountain there where they had the, this is into the, between the Old and New Testament, when the Israelites fled to the mountain. It's a plateau. No, that's not right. Marianne, you remember? But anyway, so, and of course, from came in all these particular areas, and Mary Lynn was sick all through here. She ate the wrong thing. But it was a great trip with the great leaders, and of course we did visit. There's an interesting thing. Of course, we were up here at the Sea of Galilee, and visited all up there where Christ was, and then I forgot that somewhere along this River Jordan.
Would that be Mount Sinai that you're trying to come up with?
No. It's a big plateau that when the Israelites were being driven out of Jerusalem, that area, they went up to keep from the Romans or whoever at that time. In fact, they're up on this plateau, this big thing, and the enemy is building a road up there. They're just slave labor had to be tough. They just kept building that road on up there. But a great place to visit. Now you can. No. But anyway, now you can go up there. They have an elevator that takes you up, or you can walk up to there too.
That's where they committed suicide, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's Masada. Okay. And they at the very end then they committed suicide. But it's a great place to visit. You see all the old buildings and so forth are still there and underground. So it was a great visit. And the road driving along down through here is a good road. But on the River Jordan, I always remember there was a place that you visited on the River Jordan that they had fixed, and there were steps and things that where people were visiting, if they wanted to be baptized, a lot of church groups, denominational groups, would come and be baptized in the River Jordan. Had a close classmate that had done that, had been baptized in the denominational, but now he can say, I've been baptized in the River Jordan, which is not a bad thing to say, but it was my best thing was seeing the River Jordan, putting my toe in it with it. But a great visit there, and again, we were fortunate to have a great guide. And it probably was a pretty good time. There was one day that we were visiting, we couldn't go to Bethlehem because they'd had some difficulties there. And it's very tough to visit a place where the police and the guard, everybody stands around with a machine gun. We just pray that never happens in our situation there. But enjoyed every moment of our trip there. So again, this is where we're going to be talking about. These are the areas that we'll be looking at over this period of time there.
Do you have pictures
Oh yeah.
of your trip?
Yeah, oh yeah. We'll get them sometime. You can come visit. Again, here's another map from it. I think this is the one you wanted, wasn't it, Bobby? Here's another one that shows some good pictures that we'll be referring to this a lot, because in studying Joshua, if you don't kind of know where you are, it's kind of difficult there. So we'll be looking at this map a good bit throughout our study. Again, we'll end right here. We'll talk about what were the borders of the Promised Land, as we showed you there, the charge that God gave to Joshua, what encouragement did God give to Joshua, what arrangements will be made with the Reubenites, the Gadites, and Manasseh, which they settled on the east side, and you can read about that. And what did the people promise Joshua? Now, in this case right here, the Gadites, Manasseh, and the Reubenites, a part of the Manasseh was on the east side. But we'll leave you this one thing. They couldn't they couldn't go on the east side unless they did what? Huh? Help their brethren. They went in and battled with the others in their conquest of Canaan. Then they could stay on the east side. And they did, as we'll read. And we'll end it right there. And again, thanks for your comments. And let's study on.